This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we now have an update on one of the narratives that was in large part the basis for Republicans' election denialism back in 2020. Dinesh D'Souza, this conservative writer who has since been discredited, released the following statement. As those who have seen the film or read the book know, 2000 Mules was based on cell phone geolocation data collected and reviewed by True the Vote. An analysis of this data revealed highly suspicious patterns of certain cell phones which were recorded in the location of 10 or more drop boxes. This data was the premise of the film. During the production of this film as a supplement to the geolocation data, True the Vote provided my team with ballot Dropbox surveillance footage that had been obtained through open records requests. We were assured that the surveillance videos had been linked to geolocation cell phone data, such that each video depicted an individual who made at least 10 visits to Dropboxes. Indeed, it is clear from the interviews within the film itself that True the Vote was correlating the videos to the geolocation data. We recently learned that surveillance videos used in the film may not have actually been correlated with geolocation data, which means that the entire basis of this film was based on a false premise. So can you speak on the impact that this had, especially in light of the fact that we all know this now not to be true?
Yeah, so look, Dinesh D'Souza used a lot of words to say it was all bullshit.
Right.
Okay, the fact is that this entire movie, this entire movement
Right.
that was created after the 2020 election to falsely say that there was this massive effort to illegally traffic in ballots or whatever other nonsense, it was all a lie. And so it did enormous damage, though. It did damage to individuals who got themselves caught up in this. It did damage to communities that were cast under, enormous clouds of suspicion. But, it did something else. It did enormous damage to the entire belief structure for millions and millions of Americans, not just the people who saw the movie, but people who were lied to, who heard second and third hand that there was all these irregularities. And here we are now sitting, not after 2020, we're sitting after 2024 and finally hearing that Dinesh D'Souza has now come up with blah, 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 blah to say it was all bullshit.
Well, what does it say that they waited until after the election, after they got what they needed from it? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we knew that this wasn't true. We knew this was all bullshit. But he peddled this stuff to give justification for a lot of Trump supporters to continue to feel aggrieved. And they were successful in that. And there is probably a non-zero number of people who came out because they truly did believe that the 2020 election was stolen. So what does it say about the media environment that we're in that they can just peddle straight bullshit to people, wait until the moment where it's no longer useful, and at that exact moment, they can disavow it and move themselves away from it when the damage was clearly already done?
Yeah, look, I think there are two problems with the media environment we live in that this illustrates. Number one, as you have pointed out, that there is a right-wing ecosystem of media outlets that spread this kind of information. I mean, I have seen it in information that is spread about me that is not true. It kind of germinates up from one place and then it goes through this sort of series of tunnels and websites you've never heard of and influencers you've never heard of and Twitter accounts, that you can't even believe that they have followers. And then the next thing you know, it has jumped to places that you have heard of, New York Post, Fox News, whatever it is, right? There's a whole ecosystem, and it has been very corrosive to democracy. And this is an example of the kinds of information that tends to flow through there. But the second is the legacy media. And, sure, the legacy media, to its credit, was skeptical of this movie and D'Souza and the like, but it did not put the kind of energy behind this that you see it put behind a lot of other stories. This should be a front page story in every newspaper, and this should be leading the news on every news outlet. There is a reason why your viewers, who, by the way, outnumber the viewers on the legacy media, I might add, are hearing about this in a standalone video that'll run several minutes, right? Like people will get a full picture of this, but you're not getting that in the mainstream media. Instead, what you're getting in the mainstream media, you're getting a lot about pardons,
Right.
pardons.
Right.
You're getting a lot of that. I went back and saw there was a fact check, an endless series of fact checks about whether or not Kamala Harris was right or wrong that Donald Trump was going to implement Project 2025. I'm waiting for the corrections because it turns out everything she said was true. In fact, it may have understated how much she was going to implement Project 2025. And so, you're kind of left, like you said, after the election with, sure, they were skeptical of this movie and the right-wing ecosystem, pumped it up. But I think there has to be a lot of soul searching now about why there is not more resources being put into, people who are in the center and in the center left and on the left, to counter this information like you do. And also why the legacy media failed to highlight this and just beat this drum every day.
Right. I mean, you're right in the sense that they do confer this degree of goodwill. They allow themselves to take things that Republicans say at face value, even when they are so overtly false, like 2,000 Mules was, and their lack of a strong willingness to combat this kind of stuff does give an opening for the right to continue ramming this stuff down everybody's throats. And clearly it has an impact. I mean, how many people out there really did see 2,000 Mules as some justification, some bogus justification to believe these claims by Donald Trump and his mouthpieces that the 2020 election was stolen?
Right. And I know this is like a different topic, but, Joe Biden pardoned one person. Okay. One person. And the mainstream media, I was looking on a website the other day. They had a little ticker about it. Like literally, they're tracking this pardon of his son, right, minute by minute. Donald Trump has said he is going to pardon hundreds and thousands of people who were convicted for crimes on January 6th.
Right.
But
it's baked into the cake that he's already going to commit unconstitutional acts, corrupt acts, and so that's clearly, we already know that that's not going to get even close, even a fraction, a modicum of the coverage that it gets when Joe Biden does something who, let's be honest, every single person on God's green earth would do if they were in the same position as him.
Yeah. So on this 10,000 Mules thing, it feels like a little too late. It is too little too late from Dinesh D'Souza. His statement is very lawyerly, wonderful. It's too little too late from the other people, because not just Dinesh D'Souza that has to distance themselves from this movie, but it's also too little too late because here it is. He has issued this statement, and I can go to any one of the mainstream media news sites, and I don't see this on the front page. I don't see this leading the news. I don't see this at the top of the news. I don't see this being contextualized for what damage it has done to democracy, which I promise you is a lot more damage than a single pardon that a president gives to his son. Right. Okay. And so all of the ink spilled and all of the coverage of that, you're not seeing in this. So how do I fit this into the media ecosystem? That's how I fit it into the media ecosystem.
You did mention one point that I thought was especially interesting, and that was that the statement here was very lawyerly. What legal exposure do you think that Dinesh D'Souza had, and what legal exposure does he absolve himself from by virtue of putting out this statement?
Look, I think that one of the things we have learned over the last few years is that even as the political branches have completely failed us, the courts sometimes have stood up. And the threat of court has sometimes stood up. And in particular, in the defamation context. I mean, look at what Fox News had to go through about its lies with Dominion voting. And so, you have seen the courts in certain areas be very, very powerful and potent weapons for the truth. It is not ideal. It's a costly way to do things. It takes a long time. But look what happened with Rudy Giuliani. Eventually there was some modicum of justice there. Yeah. And so I have no doubt that this statement was probably lawyered, and I suspect that this is all part of trying to deal with the risks around defamation.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a sad state of affairs that you can perpetuate this disinformation scheme to the point where you convince a hell of a lot of people in this country that there was fraud where there existed none, and then basically try to absolve yourself with some lawyerly statement at the end of all of this, where you say, "Just kidding, all of it was basically a fraud unto myself."
Right, because remember, Salem Media Group, which was involved in this movie, they apologized to one particular individual last May. and they took 2000 Mules off their platform and said they no longer distribute it. And that was last May. And here we are, now, as you say, after the election, and we have this statement. But again, I come back to the statements are fine. But, in this day and age, you cannot count on the right-wing media to amplify this statement. The left, the center and the center left independent media, the media that like what you do, like what Democracy does, that is sort of fearlessly, not bowing down to Donald Trump. They are underfunded. They are not embraced in the way in which it is on the right, and that's just a fact. That has to change. That's one of the things I've talked about having to change. And the legacy media, they feel like, well, we wrote that story a long time ago. And so it's one and done. So, we're just going to go back to writing another comparison of Richard Nixon's pardons.
Right.
The pardoning of Richard Nixon and Joe Biden.
Well, all of that underscores the importance of the work that you do as legacy media fails to meet this moment over and over and over again. For folks who are watching right now, if you're not yet signed up for Democracy Docket, it's an outlet that I use on a daily basis. It's a trusted resource, one of the most trusted resources that I've ever gotten my hands on. So if you're not yet signed up, please make sure to sign up. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.